thank you all for joining me. It is an honor to be on stage today. I've come here from Edinburgh, Scotland, to join. This talk today is not as much for indie developers as it is for those of us whose jobs require us to play well with others, especially at companies that are looking to grow. I will start with an apology, because this talk will mention AI. You have seen this, you have heard this in headlines, but we are standing at an inflection point in our industry. The landscape beneath us is shifting in ways we haven't seen since the mobile explosion in 2008 to 2010. AI is fundamentally changing how code gets written and how software will be designed. The pace of development is accelerating, and the boundaries between disciplines are blurring faster than ever. This paradigm shift will affect how you write code. Your craft is changing whether you want it to or not. So why am I talking about transit systems today? Because as development becomes commoditized, your most valuable skill won't be syntax or algorithm design. It will be your ability to see your work in the context of the bigger picture, to understand the complex systems your code will exist within. As design and product are pressured to deliver faster, with fewer people hired into those roles, there may be less emphasis on planning and more about executing off of vibes. Urban planners and people building cities don't just envision individual roads or stations in isolation, but they also don't plan every detail years ahead. So who am I to talk about this? I have worn many hats: designer, developer, tech lead, product manager, and design leader at companies ranging from tiny 5-person startups to massive 50,000-person enterprises. 10 years ago this week, Masterclass launched, the first product I shipped as a developer. For the last 6 years, I've focused on design strategy, especially native mobile, at Lululemon and Atlassian across Trello, Confluence, and Jira. And last year, I jumped to GitLab to create an experience strategy for their planning product. I think a lot about the role of planning in the software development lifecycle. But why transit systems? I grew up super rural, but I've spent my entire adult life in cities. I have never commuted to work via car. I traveled via subway or trains in Boston, via buses or by bicycle in San Francisco, mostly on foot in Seattle, though I do love the monorail, and by ferry the year that I lived on Bainbridge Island. Spending all this time on public transit, I've thought a lot about how urban infrastructure is planned. They don't just plop down random roads or subway stops. They're designing entire networks, figuring out how people move through cities, where they transfer between systems, and how everything serves the community both now and years ahead. What if instead of focusing on overly detailed software roadmaps, we made city plans for our products? So what is a city plan? A city plan is like a product vision. It doesn't dictate every detail. It establishes key principles, connections, and growth patterns that enable individual decisions to form a coherent whole. That transportation section of a city plan doesn't design every bus stop or every subway station. It establishes corridors where transit should flow and connection points that must exist. It creates the framework that guides implementers' decisions while leaving them the flexibility to solve specific challenges as they arise. So what's my point related here today with software? The hardest part of building apps often isn't writing code. It's figuring out what to build in the first place and making those big architectural bets that will shape everything that comes after. I don't think you can practice your craft of writing code to the highest level possible without understanding where an app is going if you are working at a large organization. If you're an indie developer, this is easier, but anyone working with at least one other person needs to coordinate work. Imagine working with hundreds or thousands of other developers at a company. Many modern roadmaps have devolved into glorified backlogs with dates. This shift transforms what should be strategic navigation into tactical to-do lists, projected forward into time. Instead of painting a coherent vision where the product is headed, these high-fidelity backlogs focus on granular feature delivery with artificial precision about timing. This affects you and your ability to ship. A roadmap is not a plan. Road mapping can create false certainty about the future, setting unrealistic expectations. It emphasizes output, which is features shipped over outcomes, problems solved. It constrains innovation by prematurely locking in implementation details. It treats road mapping as an exercise in scheduling rather than strategic direction setting. It reduces a team's ability to adapt to changing conditions or learnings. So let's dig into my metaphor of transit lines. Think of transit lines as the roads, railways, and sidewalks in a city. When we talk about transit lines, we're talking about the how of customer movement. Is the user using your app, visiting your website, reading an email, or walking into a physical location? For this image, if you're not super familiar with Trello, for context, the app's mascot is a husky dog named Taco. At Trello, I discovered the power of this transportation metaphor while I was leading our mobile design team. The mobile org struggled with our relationship to web. Surprise API changes would hit us without warning, and our small team lacked the resources to consult on every web feature. I said it felt like being the neglected caboose at the end of a very long release train. And that's when it clicked for me. Web and mobile platforms should function like different transit modes in a unified system. Just as high-speed trains and light rail serve distinct needs within one connected network, our platforms needed to function together while embracing their unique strengths. So here's how I started thinking about this. For many companion apps to a SaaS product, the web is your heavy rail system. Even if your app is a native product, you still have a marketing website, you still have social media, you still have other channels, but you're definitely touching the web. The web is the established infrastructure that's been around a long time. It handles a ton of traffic every day. And for those SaaS apps, this is usually the core transit backbone for your business. And mobile apps, especially in the context of a companion app, are kind of like modern light rail in that they're built for shorter trips within the city, maybe running errands. Could be used for daily commuting, but rail cars are not designed for hauling freight or long distance journeys. Mobile apps keep things streamlined and focused on everyday tasks that users want to complete quickly. Mobile web is kind of your bus system. You've got flexible routes, a lot less infrastructure to get it going, no app store reviews. With the browser, anyone can hop on, no download required. But it does compromise on experience quality. Responsive web cannot compete with native mobile when it comes to performance, permanence, accessibility, speed, and security. And AR/VR, that's like flight in our transportation system. It completely opens up these new dimensions of movement. Suddenly, you're not just moving horizontally, you're moving vertically, seeing things from a completely different perspective. But there's definitely a higher barrier to entry. Like airports, you need special terminals and equipment, the headsets, maybe even a dedicated space to move around in. And let's be honest, it is not for every journey. You would never take a flight to go grocery shopping, right? In the title of this talk, I use the term TouchPoints. TouchPoints are those moments when your user actually interacts with any of your transit lines, your channels. They're like the bus stops, train stations, and airports in your customer's journey in this metaphorical city that we're planning. App download-related touchpoints actually start way before the app is downloaded, like how people walk from their house to the first stop on a light rail journey that takes them to the airport. email marketing campaigns, search engine results, referral links, website banner ads, blog posts, influencer reviews and recommendations, app store listings. All these are touchpoints are before app download. Onboarding includes some of your most critical touchpoints in establishing credibility with users. This is where people are trying to board a ticket or buy a ticket and board the train. If you make it hard for them, they might catch a taxi or an Uber. So welcome screens, account creation, priming before asking for permissions, then system alerts, tutorials, feature highlights, upgrade prompt. And transactions are the core touch points of any e-commerce app. These are the light rail stops through the museum quarter in Amsterdam. Add to cart, save for later, select payment method, order summary, shipping and delivery, confirmation email, initiate a return. In native mobile, we have the opportunity to interact with the physical world in ways that web alone just can't compete. NFC tags, store beacons, geofencing alerts, location-based push notifications, augmented reality markers, Wi-Fi hotspots with app-specific landing pages, and QR codes on literally anything. I could list examples of touchpoints for days, but we don't have time for that. I do plan to drop some of them on my website in an article about how to identify and understand touchpoints for whatever your experience is. But the important takeaway is to think of touchpoints as stations on the transit lines. Ideally, if you're at a larger organization, if design and product are doing their jobs, you'd already have the context you need about planned touchpoints for your app without asking. But from what I've seen, that can be the exception to the rule. So back to my metaphor. The most critical part of any transit system aren't just the lines themselves, but the transfer points where they connect. On native mobile, we have unique handoffs, like physical to digital bridges, such as where in-store technology connects with in-app transactions. On the Lululemon app, I designed the wish list to allow shoppers to share the list with in-store staff. Imagine being able to have an employee walk you through the store to show you each item on your wish list in your app, or even better, the wish list of somebody else that you're shopping for. The most elegant systems make these connections seamless. So you can ask yourself, do you have any sense of the most important touch points or connections for your apps with these other channels? When these experience maps are incomplete or don't exist, you have to ask strategic questions to build elegant, future-proof infrastructure. Without this perspective, it's like asking track layers to build light rail without telling them which neighborhoods you're connecting or why. They might build perfectly engineered tracks that go in the wrong direction, miss crucial connection points, or won't support future expansion needs. So let me share a concrete example from my time leading design for Trello's mobile team. Mobile is the tiny husky, and web is the big dog with the bone. In 2021, we faced a classic planning challenge. Our mobile team of about 40 people was constantly struggling to keep up with the web orb of more than 250 people, even though we were responsible for more than 35% of the monthly active users and 35% of all new signups. Despite skilled developers and agile processes, we were the slowest org to ship, we were not holding up the quality bar, and morale was at an all-time low with our developers because we lacked strategic direction and we were trying to achieve feature parity with the web despite only having 15% of the resources. This is where transit thinking transformed our approach. We reimagined our platforms using this transit metaphor. Web is trains for deep work, heavy work, and mobile for light rail with quick hops and lightweight tasks when away from desk. Instead of trying to replicate the entire train system with light rail infrastructure, we focused on creating excellent connections between the two systems. From here, this solution may seem really obvious to you, but it wasn't at the time in 2021. Because Trello had launched mobile first, they felt pressured to maintain the same features on native mobile and web well after Atlassian bought them in 2017. Acquisition-fueled growth had taken the web app in a very different direction, but there was no strategy for mobile, despite that 35% of both MAU and new signups that we were in charge of. They couldn't see the app for the larger context, just a long backlog of features that they couldn't match for parity. So what about your app are you missing right now because you're too close to it? What changes is AI forcing that you're not seeing because you're avoiding looking at the bigger picture? We conducted research and built a comprehensive touchpoint map identifying critical experiences in conjunction with value proposition. This was a collaborative process between design, product, and engineering. No single discipline did this alone. Rather than treating each touchpoint as equal, we prioritized. Instead of reactive sprint-to-sprint planning, we developed a guiding policy with clear decision-making guardrails. We got out of the business of prescriptive roadmaps and into the paradigm of using a vision like a city plan. We would prioritize experience quality for the right features over parity with web. We'd focus first on connections between platforms. We'd optimize for quick, frequent sessions rather than extended use, which we called light work versus deep work on web. And we'd leverage native device capabilities that web couldn't match, such as attaching photos, videos, or audio content using the share sheet, or capturing notes via dictation. And the results? Honestly, they blew us away. After shifting to this approach, our App Store ratings went to the highest level that they'd been in 2019. Code quality shot up. We were having 0 incidents waking people up at 3 a.m. And the team was happier too. You could feel it in the energy of our retro meetings and the way that we saw engagement in survey results. Our engineers rated team effectiveness going from 45% to 89% favorable in 6 months. People care about the why of the work that they're doing. Work happiness improved from 33% to 78% favorable. Customer satisfaction scores through the roof, up to CSAT 91, 7 points higher than Trello's web app. And for context, the average CSAT for work management software in 2022 was 77. Not only were 91% of our customers satisfied, we increased the group of extremely satisfied users from 39% to 45%. Our simplified login flow increased the success rate for authentication to 4.4%. Experience quality was increasing. And maybe most importantly, our web and mobile teams finally started working together instead of building parallel experiences. For the first time, it felt like we were building one product, not a bunch of disconnected experiences. Web and native mobile teams collaborated on the advanced checklist for notifications, and we saw an 8% increase in paid-enabled users from trials. At the scale of Trello, these numbers are wild. This shift in thinking from trying to complete a mirror of the web experience to creating an optimized, connected mobile experience is exactly what I mean by transit thinking. It's about understanding your app's place in the larger ecosystem. My example happens to be a web-heavy SaaS app. But systems thinking and building for your most important connections stands for any systems or channels your app hands off to or from in the device ecosystem or in the physical world. Strategic thinking helps across mobile, tablet, desktop, TV, AR, VR. And you might be thinking, why is this my problem? I just write the code that they ask me to write. You have a perspective that product managers and designers will never have. You see the guts of these systems. I'm not asking you to become a designer. I am challenging you to see beyond the code editor and recognize that your implementation dictates whether a customer's journey is smooth or frustrating. This isn't extra work. This is what separates truly impactful engineers from those who could be replaced by AI. Because AI can write functions and create views, but it can't understand what it feels like to be a human navigating a complex system. At least not yet. So we've talked about how systems thinking about transit lines and connections changed how we build software on Trello Mobile. Our new strategic direction also changed our planning horizon. I want to talk a little bit about how the scope of city plans, which dictate where transit investment happens in real cities, is similar to the scope of planning in software. The bigger your city gets, the further ahead you need to be looking, because big changes to a metropolis take a lot more effort than rearranging a small town. And the same goes for software as you scale. When you're an unincorporated village or a startup, you can wing it. You can build wherever looks good. No planning commission slowing you down. Your transit system, a dirt road everyone uses. Why bother with paved roads when you might up and move next month? Your planning horizon is only as far as you can see. Whatever features get you to product market fit before the money runs out. But as you get bigger, you can't freestyle it anymore. A growing town needs to think about infrastructure that lasts. That narrow bridge everyone uses, it's like your auth system creaking under load. Widen the bridge or build a new one. That's the daily debate. A growing company needs to build their software so that it won't fall apart as they scale. Your planning now stretches to at least a quarter. By the time you're a proper city or established company, you've got all these moving parts to juggle. You need thoughtful zoning and urban planning, just like your architecture needs intentional design patterns and system boundaries. Your annual roadmaps coordinate dependencies like a city plan. Where should the business district go? Where should the residential areas be made? It's the same questions we ask about where features belong in our code base. Without a long-term plan, you get chaotic urban sprawl versus a thriving city with public transit. Technical debt and UX are like traffic snarls and ugly strip malls. They are really hard to get rid of once they've taken hold. Your planners should be thinking a year ahead, not just 1 to 2 quarters. And those huge metropolitan areas and enterprise companies, they're playing the really long game. Think of how different large cities can be. So like public transportation is a mess in Los Angeles, Houston, and Bangkok. But it's remarkable in Hong Kong, Stockholm, and Singapore. Those are cities that have very different traditions of planning. For a company, those 3 to 5 year horizons at large companies aren't bureaucratic red tape. They're essential foresight. That's the difference between a system that collapses under its own weight or one that can handle millions of users reliably day after day. I am not arguing a return to waterfall as a planning method. A longer planning horizon isn't about abandoning agility or having a 5-year roadmap. It's about holding your leadership accountable for high-level strategies so your teams can be set up for success to function with autonomy. You cannot have effective agility at scale without a longer planning horizon. So I ask, are you constantly managing traffic jams? A great way to understand if your company's planning horizon matches its size and complexity is how much time you spend reacting versus building. Is your development team constantly battling production incidents or rushing hot fixes? Are you frequently hitting performance bottlenecks? Do you find yourself repeatedly balked because another team doesn't have a clear sense of the next 3 months of work? By understanding the appropriate planning horizon for your organization's maturity, you can help build a system that scales gracefully rather than constantly requiring emergency interventions. So let's talk about bad planning. I imagine that if Instagram were a city, it would be Los Angeles. And there are so many reasons for this, but I am focusing on traffic. Did you know that LA once had a huge light rail system? They had 1,100 miles of train track and trolley track within the city. But then cars got popular, and they ripped it all out for freeways in the 1960s. That single decision has shaped that region for generations. Instagram's story is similar. They started as a blazing fast native iOS app. Then cross-platform development got hot, and they pivoted to incorporate React Native, moving away from their pure native foundation. And a hybrid app can be way messy than even just a 100% React app. One of the ways we know that they regretted this choice is that when Instagram built Threads, they chose not to include React Native at all. These aren't just technical decisions, they're infrastructure bets that shape what's possible for future development. So when you're feeling the heat to cut corners on planning or rush to adopt the hot new technology, there are a few things you can actually do. First, make future integration points visible. Sketch out upcoming platform features. See how they connect with what you're building now. Even a simple whiteboard of upcoming touchpoints can help people see why certain decisions matter for future flexibility. Second, create decision records. They don't have to be fancy, just document your key choices and why you made them. This builds a kind of institutional memory, so 6 months from now, nobody's asking, why did we do it this way? So in the opposite direction, if Apple were a city, I think it would be Singapore. And Singapore's transit system is a case study in long-term planning. While cities like Los Angeles were ripping out train tracks to make way for cars, Singapore was mapping transit corridors for decades before they'd even be needed. They didn't wait until an area was congested to start planning. They shaped how a city would grow by placing transit infrastructure first. The stations weren't built for the Singapore that existed. They were built for the Singapore that would exist 20 years later. And that's the difference between reactive and proactive planning. One solves today's problems at the expense of tomorrow. The other creates possibilities that wouldn't otherwise exist. We face this choice every time we make infrastructure decisions. Apple does this same long game planning with iOS. Remember when they introduced size classes and everyone scratched their heads wondering why? That wasn't just some random API. It was laying groundwork for adaptive interfaces that would later power everything from tiny Apple Watches to complex iPad multitasking. Okay, I know that you are not Apple and that you are likely not building at that scale. I also know that Apple struggles with bugs and overcommitment. But how can you apply their successful planning principles in daily work? Design for extensibility. Embrace incremental migration, and code with future direction in mind. And what else can you do with all of the things that I've talked about visions and planning and different ways of working? First, ask if your product and design teams have a vision, a strategy, any type of long-term plan. If you have this, you are lucky and in the rare minority. Read it. Ask questions. Understand it as deeply as you can to understand the landscape that your product will exist in tomorrow. And if no vision exists, this is unfortunately where most companies are living, in a liminal state of just-in-time planning. And that isn't planning, that is improvising. You can ask for when a larger scale plan will exist. Some companies are adverse to long-term planning. In my opinion, those are the companies who will always struggle with tech debt, incidents, and experience rot as they push teams to deliver faster without a strategy. Shouldn't I ask my architects these questions? Yes, if you have one, do, great. But not everyone does. If you want to help foster a culture of planning, here are some actionable ways you can advocate for better long-term planning while connecting it to daily code quality and speed. As AI changes the landscape, thoughtful architectural decisions become ever more critical. So ask better questions. Ask open-ended questions. Hey, I want to make sure I'm building this in a way that aligns with where we're headed. Could you help me understand what other features we might add to this area in the next year? Lead with curiosity, not animosity. Connect planning to benefits that stakeholders care about. I believe a 30-minute touchpoint mapping session could save us weeks across implementation this quarter. Would you be open to exploring potential interaction scenarios with me? Connect planning to an improved user experience. To ensure seamless experiences, it would help to understand how users might interact with this feature in physical contexts. Could we explore those scenarios together? Connect planning to successes. Remember how our QR code implementation expanded to support AR markers because we planned ahead? I'd like to apply that same forward thinking to this feature. Are we done yet? Almost. We started, then everybody can have coffee and snacks and a break. We started talking today about an inflection point in our industry, with AI changing how code gets written. And we've explored how thinking like city transit planners can help us navigate this new landscape in growing organizations. In the thousands of years of human history, truly transformative technologies were not just new tools, they were new ways of thinking. The steam engine wasn't just a machine, it was a new way of thinking about distance and time. The internet wasn't just a network, it was a new way of thinking about information and connection. The AI revolution isn't just about automated code generation, about proofreading text, about creating photos that now have way less weird hands than they had a couple years ago. It's about elevating our thinking from individual lines of code to the systems and experiences that that code creates. So the next time you open Xcode, maybe don't just think about the implementation details. Because in a world where anyone can generate code, the developers who think in systems will be the ones who build the future. Thank you. And before Daniel starts talking, I just want to thank all of you. This is my first solo conference talk that I've ever given, and I appreciate all of you for being an amazing, supportive audience.